when you look at the job market and it's like young people are having a harder time finding jobs, it's because young people have less experience with adaptive problems. It's like all the small technical problems, the things that are mundane, they're getting automated very, very quickly. The really, really hard problems are these adaptive problems. They're about humans. And it's like, how can I sit down with Josh and hear him out and understand what he needs and what his ambitions are? And how can I get Josh to work with me, whatever. Like,
Hey, welcome to another round of Founder Real Talk. I'm Josh Broward, your host, CEO of Wisdom Partners, and we should have started recording 5 minutes ago. Me and our guest, Pablo Estevez, were just having a great conversation about burnout. And I was like, wait, we gotta record this. This is too good. So I'll give a little intro, and then I want to jump back to that. So Pablo is the CEO and co-founder of Time to Hire, which is using AI to modernize the hiring process, reduce recruitment times, and deliver pre-qualified talent to companies using AI-driven interviews and data-backed matching between candidates and companies. So with all of that out of the way, Pablo, so glad to have you here. And I wonder if you could go back and tell us the story about an employee who sent you a Sunday night text.
yeah. So I was telling you earlier, there's this girl on my team. She's 23, 24 years old. And she's brilliant. Like, I remember we hired her, and like, we hired her for the most junior role. She was basically working almost part-time. She immediately grew. Like, from the day we hired her, which was 7 months ago, to today, I think we paid her 4 times more than what she got offered initially. She's great. Culture-wise is great. She's like a killer. Every problem you give her is great. And she's beyond her years. Like, she'll go into a call, she'll interrupt, and like, she'll take the call, like in a very elegant way, but like, she'll take the call from you, and it's done well. And I think I haven't met many people that are young can do that. And I got a message from her on Sunday night, this Sunday actually, and it was like, I'll add some more layers to the story, and she was like, hey, can we have a chat tomorrow? And I was telling her, it was like, I've been in this business long enough to know that like, when you get that message Sunday night, like, that
Sunday
conversation
night
Monday
text.
morning, it's not going to be relaxed.
Yeah.
And so, and I remember I even rebutted. I was like, hey, I've been doing this for a long time, so I'm sure this is not a good thing, but why don't you give me kind of a heads up? And she was like, and then she just answered, she's like, can you do this time? And I was like, fuck, this is going to be really bad. And so we meet at cafe like 8:45 in the morning. We were going to meet at 9, but I was like stressed about it because she, which is, I'll tell you kind of, there's a lot of lessons here, but basically what we do at Time to Hire, we realized that I'm just going to do a little caveat because it's going to make sense to her role.
Okay, cool.
But what we do at Time to Hire is we realize that enterprise companies have 2 problems, right? Or 3. The first problem they have is their hiring capabilities are fixed, but their needs are variable. And that means 2 things. Like, that means like maybe it's January and they need to hire 80 people, but they can only hire like 5 or 6 people a month. Or maybe it's like they're very good at hiring one role and then they get a specific role that they don't know how to hire and then they're kind of like dead in the water. And the second issue they have is that like managing their whole HR, the time between I apply for a job and I actually get an interview with a hiring manager is way too high. And so what we do at Time to Hire is we developed AI that does 2 things. So the first, it's a software as a service that what it does is it automates all the screening. So when you apply to a job, our AI screens you immediately. And then instead of sending you to a talent acquisition manager, we can send you straight to a hiring manager. So we bring down the time to hire 40%. And the second thing we do is we help you find people when you're not able to fill a role because you don't have enough people or you don't have the skill set, we help you find people. So all this to give you context on this conversation around this person I was having on my team. And the reason I say this is because like the way that works, the second thing we do, we help you find people, is we have what we call a recruiter marketplace. So you build out an AI interview that you're like, hey, this AI interview is very good at understanding if Josh is fit for the role. And then we have over 350 freelance sourcers. These are sourcers that work at like Michael Page, Korn Ferry, like the world's biggest agencies. And in their free time, they go out to their people, they send them the interview link, and for every time someone interviews, we pay them money. So instead of paying a headhunter per hire, you pay for every person that passed the interview. You bring down the cost of recruiting, and obviously you get way more volume. And then the person that's doing the recruiting gets paid for every person they get. So they end up making similar amounts of money. So it ends up working all across the board. And anyways, this person I'm telling you, she's kind of in charge of running our whole operations. And I mean, we started this company recently. So, I mean, you've been around a lot of startups, Josh. There's a big mess, you know what I mean? So I just remember thinking like, fuck, if this person like isn't on my team. I was just like, I'm getting married next week. I have my honeymoon. I'm like, I'm screwed. Like, this is going to be a bad day. So we get into the meeting and she was super emotional. She was like, oh man, like, you know what? I've been thinking and I want to go back to psychology and I think of getting my master's and I want to give therapy. And I just remember I kind of sat down with her and I was like, okay, well, let's break this down. Like, I was like, look, you're having emotional days. This is an important decision. Let's break it down. And as we start kind of pulling this apart, I start to realize that like, she feeling like, she said one phrase I remember. She was like, oh, you know, I want to get a job where I'm not so important. And I was like, okay, well, like, what does that mean? You know, and we start like putting it in and like taking it out and like, what does that mean? And I started to realize like, she's really, really burned out. And I was like, oh man, it seems to me like you have too much on your plate. And we started to get into the details and we kind of realized that she has this trait where when she starts to get like overwhelmed, she wants to control things more. And so instead of delegating, she'll be like, no, I really got to own this because I got so much on my plate that I really can't mess up. So let me just own this. And anyways, I remember like we started kind of doing this deep dive and I was like, hey, you know what? It seems to me like, by the way, it's one, you might want to go do your master's in psychology and have your own practice. But it seems to me like before we even do that, it seems to me like you're exhausted, like you're really, really tired. And she's 23 years old. So she was like, oh, wow. Like I didn't think about it that way, but like 100%, I'm super tired. And then I was kind of telling you this story. I guess there's 2 or 3 tangents to that where it's like one, I remember one time I was very, very burned out and I was, I had this app on Firefox. It was called Momentum, I think. And when you open a new tab, it's like kind of corny. It just has like a picture of a seascape or like whatever, or a forest. And it just has one quote. And I remember one day I was just like, I was having one of those very shitty days. And I opened it and it just said in big letters, if you're tired, rest. And I was like, shit, that is it. Like, if you're tired, rest. Like I told this person on my team, I was like, you know what, sounds like you're very tired. And like, when you're tired, you got to rest. Like that's the one solution. But also like the more, I also find that like in general, these things around burnout, I like to think of like your ability to handle stress, kind of like, it almost feels like a radar, right? I don't know if you've seen a radar screen. But like, imagine you have a radar screen that can only go out for 5 meters. And like, when you like feel this complete burnout, it's because you're at the end of that radar screen. And it's like, you just hit the end. And I feel like the more burnouts you go through, because I mean, if you're successful, you're going to go through a lot of them. And by successful, I'm not talking about like monetary successful. I mean, like if you're doing like your life's work, you're going to push yourself to burnout plenty of times. And I feel like every time you do it, you kind of hit a new limit. I'll shut up after this one thing, but my ex-business partner, we're very close friends, and we were once having a conversation. His wife was going through something at work. I don't even remember what it was. And she was really, really stressed, and we were sitting down for dinner, and she was telling us. And there's one point where she gets up to go to the bathroom, and my business partner looks at me and goes like, holy shit. What she just explained as the most stressful thing in the world is like a Monday morning before 9:30 a.m. for us. And I was like, yeah, that is crazy. But it's like the first time you live that amount of stress, you're like, wow, the world's going to end. And then you realize it's going to be all right.
Yeah, you do sort of develop some calluses as a startup founder.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of like what I was telling you earlier, that you were like, oh, maybe we should hit record. I think that's kind of also why, it's kind of why we do it. I put out a tweet the other day where it's like, and I mean it, it's like, ever since I was little, I can remember like the thing I like most is like being proven wrong. But like not being proven wrong in like a got you type of way. But like, you know, if me and you were speaking, right, Josh, and I'm like, hey, I don't know, man, like, you know, I'm not burned out. I just really need to control this process or whatever, just to use the previous example. And we're chatting and you're like, hey, Pablo, like, I'm not sure. And you start to ask me some questions. Something in my brain clicks and I'm just like, wow, you're absolutely right. I was looking at this from the wrong angle. Like, that's like my favorite feeling in the world. It's like a drug. And I feel like if you chase it long enough, it's not necessarily the same thing, but it all ends up in the same bucket. It feels like a lot of stress. It feels like a lot of burnout. And suddenly you get these unlocks, and you can't do it every day. If you're starting a company and you're working on really hard stuff, you can maybe do it once a month or maybe once every couple of weeks. But it's like, I don't know. I'm into that feeling.
It reminds me of a leadership theory called adaptive leadership. It's by this guy named Heifetz out of Harvard. You familiar? Yeah, I see you nodding. He wrote one of the most famous HBR articles. I think it's called The Work of Leadership. It was back in the 90s. It's like been downloaded more than any other, I think. Anyway, one of the things he talks about is the need to alternate between the dance floor and the balcony. And it's like the dance floor is where the action's at. I mean, you could call it the playing field, whatever, but he's like a classical musician, so he's all about the dance floors. But the dance floor you can only see so far. Like you can respond to your immediate context. But up in the balcony, you can see movement patterns and like the much larger context. And then the next time you go down to the dance floor, the way you dance is reshaped because now you see patterns that you couldn't see from that angle. And so when I hear you talking about like stepping away and getting an unlock, a new perspective, my guess is most of the time that happens when you're like having balcony time.
Yeah, 100%. I'm trying to think about, and there's kind of like this thing where, like recently we had an issue where our conversion rates from free trials to paying customers suddenly went down drastically. And I'm speaking to the customer success guy. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, dude, I don't know. We're doing the same thing. And like, he was so in his game that I'm going to these meetings. I'm still doing the same thing. I'm saying the same thing. And we had like 2 calls and I was like, there's something weird here. I was like, it can't be doing the same thing and then getting half the result. Like something's weird. And yeah, like I don't even know if this is a good analogy for the dance floor thing, but I just remember like suddenly like I wasn't even with him anymore. And I was just looking at the numbers and I suddenly looked at like how many interviews our customers were doing. Which is a key metric to retention to us. And I saw that they had gone down 20%. I was like, oh, what went on with the interviews? And when I finally called him, he's like, oh shit, you know what? We're not doing the interviews anymore. I was like, why are you doing the interviews? And he hadn't even realized. He was just like so in his game. I feel kind of like a poser. So as you can see, I haven't read the book. But a friend of mine, he was taught by Ron. And I was having a conversation with him and he explained this concept to me, which was like almost intuitive, but like in the perfect way, because it wasn't just intuitive, which is the ironically, like anybody that works with me hears me talk about this all the time. It's like, it's one of my favorite things. I've written a LinkedIn blog post about it, it's called the most common management mistake. But essentially it's like this whole idea where, and you're more versed in this than I am. So if I say anything dumb, please correct me. But the way my friend explained it to me, and he's very eloquent, he was like, look, essentially in life, there's 2 types of problems, right? There's adaptive problems and technical problems. And what I call the most common management mistake is when you confuse technical solutions for adaptive solutions. So yes. This happens very often, like if you run a sales team or if you're running culture, like a very common mistake here is like, you'll be talking to like your CRM leader and you're like, hey, what's going on? We're not converting as much as we were last month. So adaptive problems are problems where you have to change people's behaviors. So I really conveyed Josh like, hey, stop having coffee in the morning. And so the way you solve that is very different than a technical problem. A technical problem, like you fix it and it's like the bug is gone and it's like, Josh never has to worry about that again. Like he just opens his phone and it just works, right? And so like, and I see this every day, and I think I even make the mistake very, very often. And I talk about this a lot. It's like people sometimes confuse technical solutions to adaptive problems. And I was giving you this example with CRMs, right? The other day I was on a call as well, and I was like, hey, you know, why are our numbers like down? Like what's going on with the calls? And someone on my team was like, yeah, you know what? We're going to add a new step to the CRM so that like, now in the CRM, you have to check a box that says like that you're prepared for a call, whatever. It wasn't exactly the example, but I'm just like that. I remember thinking like that's a textbook example of what Ronald Heitzfeld recommends you against doing, where it's like, so that goes into like, ironically, the most important problems to solve in business are actually not technical, which creates an interesting tangent to talk about like AI and what that means. But what I mean is like, even now, it's like solving technical problems is becoming an API. You can plug into Cloud Code and that it like programs better than most people. But the real valuable problems to solve in business, if you look at the world's biggest companies, if you look at what Apple did, they solve adaptive problems. And how do you solve an adaptive problem? It's like you want to convince people to change behavior. And so you want to do a mixture, like you want to treat them like a pressure cooker. So you want to increase the pressure of the organization. So you want to say like, hey, from now on, like the line for this company is like, we do our sales calls like this. And if you can't accomplish that line, you're not part of this company. And that like pisses people off. They're like, what do you mean we're doing a new way of doing things? And so you want to make sure you putting in the pressure, and your job as a leader is just to make sure the pressure's on. But then your job as a leader, it's like when that happens, when you're trying to change culture, people are going to want to quit. And so you want to also, the reason I say it's like a pressure cooker, if you push too hard on a pressure cooker, you got a bomb. And so you also need to be playing on this end with the pressure to be like, hey, I've been pressuring you a lot, but you know what? For this month, we're going to give a bonus. Or you know what? Like you personally, I want to take you out to lunch. I want to hear you, right? So it's like, and that's just, I remember when I first heard about this concept, and more than reading the book, I guess I got a sermon that was like over the course of a long dinner with a lot of wine. So it was like very, very immersive. And I just remember that clicked. And then like now that whenever I'm like solving a big organizational problem, or even when I joined bigger organizations and they already had current issues, a friend of mine actually last weekend was like, hey, I'm trying to do a culture change. Like, what do you suggest? And I was like, well, don't be a coward about it. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you put a lot of pressure on. Like your job is to have that pressure on. And you can let go of the pressure, but you can let go of the pressure almost individually. You can let go of the pressure by giving like a bonus, but you can never compromise on the vision of the new change you're going to do. But anyway, sorry, I speak a lot, Josh.
Man, you don't like we didn't prep this or anything, but I studied adaptive leadership in my PhD program. So I'm 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 loving it. This is fantastic. I hardly ever get to talk about this theory in this much detail, but you're right. It's the difference between a technical problem and an adaptive problem is so important, and sometimes it's really subtle. One way I describe it is a technical problem requires us to do something different. Maybe it's just using a new tool, but an adaptive problem requires us to become something different. It's more internal, whereas a technical problem is more external. Somebody somewhere knows how to fix this. We just need to find them.
But it's great. What you're saying now just also led me on to something where it's like, again, when I was saying like the world's best companies, they fix adaptive problems, is because there isn't a problem worth solving that's fully technical. So you were just like getting someone to use a new software. Right? So let's just say like I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and I'm like, I want everybody on my team to use Anthropic, right? The technical way of solving that, using it's a change of behavior, whatever. It's like I buy whatever contract with Anthropic. Every single person on my team has Anthropic. And I send out an email, I blast it to everybody. I'm like, hey, you guys all have Anthropic. And I'm going to check in on that tool a month later. And what percentage of users are going to be using Anthropic? Probably 0%. Like maybe, I spoke with a guy at a company who was like, he actually did that. And he's like, I checked in a month later and it was me and someone else on my team. And I was like, sounds like an expensive mistake. But anyways, like that would seem like almost like a, technical problem. But the real thing, it's like, how do you get them that when they're solving a task, they need to like be using Anthropic? And every single adaptive problem has like a different particular path you have to take. But all paths, they all share one thing where it's like, there's got to be a lot of pressure. And so you can start by saying like, hey, every single day, 15 minutes, like I'm going to send everybody a WhatsApp saying like, hey, try this on Anthropic. And you can start, and these could be the great ones, or you can send videos every day of like, hey, here are use cases that we're working with on Anthropic, blah, blah, blah. And so that's one way. It's like you can do, it's like that's a carrot, right? You might have to use a stick. Hopefully you don't have to. Some problems are easier, but like eventually you have to be like, hey, dude, we're going to just fire the people that are using Anthropic the least at the company. You know what I mean? And people are going to be like, holy, wow, you're like so authoritarian. And you're like, dude, it's pretty straightforward. Like you either learn how to use it or you leave. So I'm not saying that's what you should do, but I'm just saying like even what appear to be technical problems are actually super adaptive. And then just to take you like on a different tangent where it's like, I heard this podcast today, Dario, the founder of Anthropic, he was on, I think the guy's name is Darwesh or Darkesh, on his podcast. And he's so bullish on like general AGI. At one point he's like, hey, I think we'll have an AI that's like 90% as good as just a traditional software engineer in San Francisco. And I think we'll have it in under 2 years. And so to me, that's like intelligence is on tap. Technical leadership, technical capabilities is on tap. You can just, it's an API, right? Mm-hmm. And so when people are like saying like, hey, I guess maybe I'm making a wild claim because I haven't like completely thought this out in my head, but just like it's feeling intuitive as it's coming out. When people are saying like, hey, I don't hire young people anymore. And I'm not saying people are saying that, but when you look at the job market and it's like young people are having a harder time finding jobs, it's because young people have less experience with adaptive problems. Right. And so what I mean by this, it's like all the small technical problems, the things that are mundane, they're getting automated very, very quickly. The really, really hard problems are these adaptive problems. They're about humans. And it's like, how can I sit down with Josh and hear him out and understand what he needs and what his ambitions are, and how can I get Josh to work with me, whatever. And I think that area of opportunity is going to be around for a long time. Like if you can get good at this, you're going to be employable for a very, very long time, because you know what? Even if AIs automate every single job on earth, there's still room. Like at the end of the day, we're humans doing commerce with humans. And I think that what creates adaptive problems are humans.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me why you started Time to Hire.
it comes from three parts. So one of them's emotional, the other one's it's experiential, and the third one is I guess it's kind of a curiosity. Maybe those two are the same thing. But so the first emotional one, which I think is really why you do something, it boils down to two things. The first thing it's I started my first company in 19. I had a ton of fun with it. I suffered through the whole bit. Like at 19, I was such an arrogant little prick. And by the time that company spit me out, it spit me out with like every drop of arrogance was gone. And it was gone for a good reason. Because like I kind of realized like anybody that solved a really, 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 really hard problem, and there's few exceptions to this, like they've had to like eat a lot of shit. So fortunately for me, I ate a lot of shit. It was a successful exit and whatever. So we came out happy on the other end. But what I realized, I started this company at 19, and like at the beginning, I didn't know how to budget well, like from a purely financial standpoint. So I was very sheepish when it came to hiring expensive people. I never paid myself well. I never paid anybody else well. Like not in like in a way that would be considered like a human rights violation. Just like I wasn't making a great salary, like no one else was making a great salary. And so what started happening with that business, we had like a good business, we had relatively good product market fit, but the business eventually didn't scale past me. And my days just became like a nightmare of just like call after call and never being never being on the balcony, always being on the dance floor. And that just makes you a bad leader. It's like that you got to be the CEO for a reason. You got to be on the balcony more than on the dance floor, right? And so what suddenly switched was we were going into COVID. I had a business that was selling customer support. It was chatbots for banks, airlines, and insurance. And we went into COVID. It was March 8th, I think. March 2nd or March, I had like 10 days left of runway. I ended up meeting a guy, great guy, wrote a book. His name's Nathan Latka, great book. And he loaned me, I think, $150,000. Like, I'll loan you $150,000. Like, I won't loan the business money, but like, if you guarantee it, I took on that loan. And when I started to realize, I just went into work. I was like, what needs to change? And I was like, dude, I can't be, someone needs to manage my clients better. And so the first hire we did is I hired a great customer success manager, a really good guy. And I remember, I paid him more than I was making. I paid him what he was worth. It's not like I wasn't making a lot of money, but I paid him what he was worth. And suddenly, like from that day on, I was like, look, I'm going to manage this business. If I'm going to lose this $150,000 personally, like I'm going to run this business like I can run it, which is like with a bit of time. And I take a lot of thought, like I take a lot of time to think about things and actually come up with my mind. As you can see on this call, I meander a lot. And so I started hiring really good people. And what happened is we grew that business from $1 million in revenue to $3 million in revenue that same year. And that year was only half as long. And we started getting net revenue retention rate of 145%. And this guy was doing such good work that I started to do really good work on another side of the business. And little by little, I started hiring great managers everywhere, and the business really turned around. And so I kind of realized, I was like, wow, this is like, I was thinking about this problem wrong. I was like, I don't want to spend money on people where it's like, if you spend money on the right people, that's like the world's highest return on investment, right? And so that was like kind of my motivation. I was like, oh man, there has to be a better way to hire, right? And I guess like I kind of realized my benchmark was low. Like I was bad at it. So it was like, it was pretty easy to make something better. And then just from the technical curiosity bit that I was saying, and I'll tell you the last thing. One, I sold this chatbot business right before ChatGPT with a non-compete. And I was like, man, this space is getting so interesting. There's like so much ways to build a great company around the space. Like, how do you do it? And I remember I was like super taken aback, not by the AI's ability to answer. I was taken aback by the AI's ability to read. I was like, what do you mean? I can just plug in a bunch of information to this ChatGPT and like it can kind of understand it and take on information. So I started to think like, what are the jobs where you speak with so much people and you need to retain information, right? And so my first thing was like, oh, well, sales jobs. But I didn't like the sales job approach because I just didn't like it for reasons I probably can't explain, but I didn't love, but I was kind of thinking like, how can I make an application where it just listens to a bunch of people and then it makes it necessary? So I thought sales jobs, but I was like, oh, that seems a little bit complicated. It's too variable. I thought healthcare. I was like, oh, well, why don't I help healthcare professionals? Like I just record the meetings that they're having with their patients and I fill out I think it's called employee health record. But then I kind of realized I did an MVP for that and I was like, I don't like medicine or I don't like doctors. You know what I mean? Like I shouldn't do that. And me and my co-founder were thinking like, hey, what's the biggest problem you ever had? And I was like, hiring, man. It's the biggest issue I've ever solved in my life. Like, and that's when we're like, wow, this can really work. And so my first thesis, I was like, I'm just going to build a tool. It's going to interview the whole world. Even if like, when Joshua, you're like, hey, I want to hire someone. I'm like, I've interviewed the whole world. Who do you want to hire? Like, I can just introduce you, right? So that was kind of the thesis. And then little by little, we migrated into the thesis we had today that I mentioned at the beginning of of the podcast. So, and then the final thing that really brought it together, I sold my business. I joined Ernst & Young as a partner, and EY, like, great company. I met some really good people, but like I was very taken aback with how inefficient their hiring process was. Like I just remember thinking like, wow, this is one of the world's biggest employers. I think they have over 400,000 people or some crazy number like that. And I was like, if this is the world's biggest employer and this is what like HR looks like for them, the delta is huge. And so we took it upon ourselves. We started building. We're very happy where we're going. We still have a long way to go, but I think it's an interesting space. I think hiring is going to change tremendously over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I have a hiring story. Way back in the day, I was really trying to get a job working as a consultant for Kaiser Permanente and could not get past the screening interview because they would look at it and they'd look at my background and they'd say, I don't know, I don't know, because I didn't check the boxes in the right way. And then for the same exact department where I couldn't get past the screening interview, they couldn't find anybody that they wanted, and they hired recruiters. And some recruiter came and found me. I wasn't even looking for the job, and was like, "Look, I know your background is different, but I think you'll be good for this." And I was like, I mean, I've been trying, let's go. And so he put me up, I got the job. Later on, like, sort of one of my boss's peers was like, how in the world did she find you? And I was like, I couldn't get through the interview process with Kaiser, like I had to go. Like they found me. I don't know how, I don't know. So like, it's a total like case in point for why the world needs time to hire.
100% agree. And I think it's like, I think this problem is getting, the way I look at it, it's like, let's think of hiring as a space, right? Hiring as a space is kind of moved. It's being pressured on two fronts. Again, going back to this whole adaptive thing. But the first front is getting pressured on. It's like, as AI gets more advanced, the quality of the person you hire becomes a way more relevant decision. John D. Rockefeller didn't have to think a lot about the quality of his hires, you know what I mean? Like, but suddenly, like, wow, one person that's efficient at using AI is worth 10 times an average person. They can get through as much work done, right? So suddenly who you hire is way more important. And then what happens to those people? Those people are getting way too many job offers, right? So it's like, they also only want to entertain companies that like have an incredible hiring experience. So, and then the final thing that's going on, it's like, candidates are getting very good at using AI. So like every candidate, when they apply to their job, they're using an AI to put in the keywords that you want to see in their job description. So we have this weird thing where it's like the world's best candidates, they want a super positive candidate experience. They want to get interviewed immediately. They want personalized feedback. And then on the other end, the hiring managers are getting more applications than ever in history. And if you look at the time to hire, it's gone up from, I think, 70 days on average in 2019 to over 88 days in 2024. So it's like, it's going up, and it's going up very, very quickly. And the final thing is like, I meet candidates that they're like, especially young people. Like young people, they don't have a lot of CV, but I met some, I mean, there's two people in my office that are super young and they're just rock stars. And it's like you look at their CV and they're like, what do I do with this piece of paper? Just that they went to school. But yeah, if you can sit down and interview those people, yeah, exactly. It's like you've done the thing. If you interview those people, you can really get to know them. And so what's going on with our platform is like, we'll meet candidates. They're like, man, I love the experience because I can never cram in what I want to tell you into a CV. I can never put it, like, just like this podcast. It's like, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't talk about adaptive leadership in my CV, but I'm passionate about that. But if I chat with you for an hour, you'll be like, hey, I think you're a good fit for Kaiser or whatever. So I'm excited for the space. I think a lot of very exciting things are going to be happening in the coming years. And I think that the bar is so low. Like there's been no innovation in the space. And I think that's changing. The reason there's been no innovation, if you look at like at least the VC investments in this space, it's like they weren't the biggest home runs because there wasn't a lot of money in HR. But when you can mix in AI and you can create a play where it's software and service, and eventually you just built the world's best AI recruiter and it's completely software, you can hit a different budget line. It's not like, hey, like this is an ATS and I charge you $6,000 a month. It's like, no, this is your recruiting department. And for your recruiting department, you pay $100,000 a year, right? And so I think that it's becoming an investable space. I don't know, I'm excited about it.
Talk some about some things you've learned the hard way. That's a question we always ask, and you already jumped in there. Maybe you could also share with us a win you've had in the past year.
It's not that I don't have wins. I'm thinking the thing with the wins, it's like, you know, this phrase like gamblers remember their losers more than their winners.
Yeah.
I think that applies like when you're a founder, and Josh, you know this, it's like you got to win every day. Because if you can't win a little bit every day, you'll be spiraling by day 10, right? So it's like when you're like, hey, what are your wins? It's like I try to win every day. You know, I try to win as much as I can every single day. And if I don't win for 2 days straight, I'm having a really bad week. And so it's like more than give you a particular example. Like if you look at my day to day, what does like a win look like? It's like I look at my key, like my KPIs for the business, and every single week I'm trying to increase some KPIs by 2, 3, 4, 5%. There's weeks where I'll increase all of them by 5%. Most weeks I go down on most of them. I go up a lot on one of them. So like to me, it's like, yeah, I mean, like if I were to talk about my wins, it's like you have to be very, very specific. You know what I mean? Like, but genuinely, I mean, this is what keeps me, and I think it's the same for every entrepreneur. It's like, it's such a hard life. It's such a hard job that you gotta have at least something that you're like, oh, if I close this one deal, or if I can launch this one new feature, or I can launch, and you fuel your business for that long enough, and eventually $1 million in revenue turns into 5 and then turns into 25, and you're looking at really big exits. You know what I mean? So I think it's tough. Like I don't know. I think it's tougher. I think I gotta assume even Elon Musk has to think kind of this way. You know, it's just like you look at the like hard things he's doing, and you're like, oh, I gotta assume he's gotta get into work and be like, oh, like what's my win of the day? You know what I mean? But anywho, yeah, I kind of think about it like that. It's like when I come into work, I celebrate a lot of very small victories. And maybe if I put together 40 or 50 big victories, it's like we got a good deal or we raise more money or whatever. But like I got to focus on the small things.
I mean, I think that's so important. And it's something we teach founders a lot is, well, one practice I do most weeks is I start the week on Monday by looking at what did I accomplish last week, and just like it takes 20 minutes to do the whole exercise, you know, but it's a little bit of just like, that was a win, that was a win, that was a win. Okay, good. And then I say, what are my priorities for this week? And that's how, like 80-90% of Mondays, that's how I start. And the founder life is so hard. It is actually encouraging and sustaining for me to do that little like exercise of just like acknowledging progress.
For sure. This is like a little, I heard on a podcast recently, the strategy that I like. This guy was just like, hey, I wake up every morning, I'm like, what's the most important thing I need to get done? Like, if I can only get one thing done today, like, what is the thing, right? And this very successful entrepreneur, very, very successful. And he just says like, oh, and sometimes I get that done by 12 p.m. and I just go play golf. And I'm like, it is that easy. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes if you can just do the most important thing of your calendar that day, like, and you can just celebrate that victory. Like you don't have to do that. If you can do that 365 times a year, that's going to compound.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big transformation.
Well, how do you invest in yourself as a leader?
I like to read a lot. And like, I like to read a lot. I like to listen to a lot of podcasts. I consume like a lot of media, and I consume it like kind of like on two fronts. There's this investor I like, Monish Pabrai, $1 billion investor, and the guy has this thing where he's very charismatic if you can hear an interview of him. But he has a thing where he's like, oh, I just copy everything, and he's like, look at all my trades. He's like, I copied this one from Warren Buffett. I copied this one from Lee Lu. I did this one from Druckenmiller. Like, I just speak to these guys. I'm like, great trade. I'm like, I like your trade. I'm just going to do the same trade. This guy, just to put you into context, I think he turned $8 billion into $2.5 billion in like 10 years or some crazy number like that. Super, super genius guy. He has a book called Dando Investor, which is good. But like, I like to read a lot. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books, and I feel like some of it sticks. I have no concern if it doesn't stick. If it doesn't stick, I'm like, it's probably not worthwhile. And sometimes things stick for a week and then they kind of, I forget about them. But I kind of treat like my way of work. I feel like that's kind of how LLMs work. It's like, I put a lot of context into it, and then I'm like, oh, well, maybe this makes sense. So that's it. Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I think I could go on and say like, hey, you know what, Josh, apart from that, like, you know, I've kind of created these frameworks. Like I take the framework from Ronald Hatesfield. I take this framework from over there. I take this framework from like the Rockefeller documentary, biography or something. But in reality, it's like, I like to consume a lot of this content. And like sometimes I speak with my friends and I'm like, hey, like listen to this audiobook or read this book, and they're like, how do you read so many? I enjoy it. Like I love hearing how other people solve problems. 95% of the problems they've solved, I'm never gonna have to solve. But every now and then you hear something like, I'm having that problem at work now.
Yeah, or it helps you, you know, their problem was different, but the way they solved it helps you solve your problem. So if somebody out there is listening to this and they like what you're doing with Time to Hire, what's the best way they can support you? I mean, I know, of course, investment and that kind of stuff, but who are you guys trying to meet? Like, what kind of intros could people do for you?
So we're trying to meet enterprise companies, which we define enterprise very broadly. It's above 250 employees that are hiring constantly. And we traditionally help those companies in over a month reduce their time to hire by 35%. And we can do it for a way cheaper cost to hire, right? So we're generally very successful helping those companies, and we're trying to meet as many of those companies as we can. So just companies, 250 plus employees. Most of our clients do white collar hires, but we just launched a blue collar hire division with a very big client in Latin America last week, and it's getting the same results. So if we would have spoken a month ago, I would have been like, oh, white collar hires, but now realistically, just enterprise businesses, 250 plus employees that hire maybe more than 5 or 10 people a month, we can really help them transform their hiring.
Do you need to? Who's the best entrance point for you? The HR director, the CEO?
Look, traditionally, HR is the one that manages the business. Sometimes the first conversation we have with the CEO, and we just kind of talk about like how hiring is changing. It's more of a vision conversation. But ultimately, we try to meet with the HR department.
Okay, cool. Pablo, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I love the conversation around the leadership world and all your stories. And I hope for all the people out there looking for jobs, I hope all the HR folks in the world decide to work with you to make the process better, because it sucks.
Thank you very much, Josh. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for putting up with my meandering. And yeah, if anybody wants to reach me, my email is p@timetohire.ai. So they can shoot me an email.
That was bold, putting your email out there.
Yeah. I've done it before, but whatever. I could build a new one if it gets saturated.
So that's all for the official podcast. I just want to say thanks.
Thank you, Josh. This was a lot of fun.